Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. So I'm Brett. I'm currently in my final year of clinical psychology training, and I'm joined by Levine today. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. My name is Levine. I'm also in my final year of clinical psychology training. So yeah.
Great. Thanks for joining, Levine. So we're going to chat a little bit about being a trainee psychologist and the sort of golden ticket of getting on to clinical training as
Um,
well. So maybe we can start there, sort of a bit about your route onto training because everyone's different.
yeah. Where do I start? Okay, well, I feel like maybe my experience is a little bit different than other people's. Because I've known that I've wanted to be a psychologist since I was 7. So a lot of my route was very much tailored towards psychology. So I did a undergraduate degree in psychology and criminology. And then after that, I did a master's in, what was it, mental health research. And then that whole like limbo phase of what are you doing? Like, are you going to get a job? Like, where are you going to get a job happened for a while. And in the end, I just applied for, it was a thing called, I don't even know if they still do it anymore, but it was called a graduate mental health worker trainee scheme thing.
Hmm.
So I did that for 9 months and then I dropped out um, because
Okay.
it was one of the, and it was a bit bad because it was funded. So it was almost like a PWP training course sort of thing. But I dropped out because first of all, it was like the pay was 3/5 of band three. And so it was like really hard to live on that salary. And then
Yeah.
on top of it, like the stuff that they were covering was stuff that felt like it was very much like undergrad stuff. So I didn't feel like I was learning loads. The clinical experience was great. That was the saving
Hmm.
grace of the whole thing. So I did that, dropped out and got a job in IAPT as a graduate mental health worker, and then was working there for a bit. Then ended that after about 2 years, and then got a job as a like a school wellbeing support counselor ish person, and then
Hmm.
straight after that got into training. So it's weird because also in between that I had lots of random jobs. Like I worked in an estate agent, I worked like for this laundry company, like it was loads of random things. I was a tutor for a
Yeah.
bit. But I feel like I've always known what I wanted to do, it's been pretty much linear in that sense. I never really had like a career change or anything like that.
Yeah. God, that does sound, yeah, like a bit of a different route. I think talking to more and more people that it feels like regardless of what the application tells us, there's so many different ways to to
Yeah,
arrive on training.
definitely.
Um, I'm just interested as well, if you don't mind sharing, like what was it when you were 7 that made you think psychology is right for you?
So there's a show called Child of Our Time. It doesn't show anymore. It doesn't show anymore, but it's a show that was following kids that were born in the millennium, so 2000 babies. And I think there was about 7 or 8, maybe even 10 of them. And they just tracked them as they were growing up. And I guess the kids now will be 22. So I think they stopped when they were 18. And it was just showing like, oh, development, child development. Like I remember being really obsessed with, like the Ocean Five, like the 5 personality traits, like openness, like
Mm.
what is it? Yeah, extroversion. I remember they were talking about it, and I was like, oh, how do they know? Like, how can they predict that these kids are going to be like this? And there was a psychologist on the show, but he was like a research psychologist,
Mm.
talking about like child development. And I remember just being like, oh my gosh, I really want to do this, but I didn't know what it was. And my mum was a social worker. So at the time, she was like, oh, it's psychology and this is what it is. But I still didn't really understand what that meant. But from then, I was like, yep, I want to work with kids and I want to learn how they learn and understand the world. And I want to understand people's personalities and behaviors. And that was it.
Oh, that is really interesting. I'm not sure if I've come across other people that have decided quite so young
I
in
know.
clinical psychology. I think some other professions, people I know, maybe more creative type people I
Mm,
haven't come across, they're like, oh, I want to be an actor, musician, artist, whatever it might be from early age. But yeah, I mean, maybe people are out there, maybe,
mm,
but yeah,
yeah.
God,
I
uh,
think my mum would say it's because I'm nosy. Like I was a nosy kid,
or curious as you now you're
curious as I love
training,
to reframe it.
training in
Exactly.
it.
So maybe that's what it was. I don't know. I did
Yeah,
think about being a lawyer as well because I talk a lot. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll be really good at arguing. So
yeah, thank
yeah.
you. God. Yeah, and so your route was quite all planned, geared towards it, with some other sort of jobs thrown in there, which I
Mm,
think most people probably have to do at some point through studying
yeah.
or changes of jobs. And then how many times did you apply to before you got on or got an interview or clinical trainer?
So I was really fortunate because I didn't apply. I know some people do like test run applications. I didn't apply until I felt like I was actually ready. So my first application, I got an interview. Um, but that interview was awful. Like there's an infamous story about this interview. Like it was awful. And so I didn't get on. And then the second year I applied, I got on. And I only had one interview the second time as well. And
Mm.
that was where I ended up going. So yeah, in that sense, I applied twice, but I didn't want to get my hopes up and do like test run applications. So I really didn't know what I was doing. I kind of just went for it full throttle first time round, and then got an interview.
Yeah. And what's the story? Can you share the story
Oh
about
my
the
gosh.
interview, or is it not
No, I can share the story.
shareable?
I think I've shared this story somewhere else as well. But
Yeah.
essentially, what happened was I don't know if I won't say the university. I went there,
Yes.
not having any expectations because, like I said, I never did any applications or anything before. Not having any expectations of what it would be like to have an interview for doctorate training, and then got there and was like, no, this ain't it. Like I don't know what's going on, but I'm not feeling well. Normally on a normal interview for a job, you'll feel a little bit like people are giving you something back to let you know if you're
Mm.
going the wrong way. There was like dead silence. And there was a point where like one of the people on the panel, I think he was actually a psychologist, he just stopped writing. And so I'm talking and I'm going on and on, and he's just not writing anything. And then all of a sudden they all just stop writing. I'm like, what's going on?
Oh my
So
God.
I'm like, oh gosh. And then I just realized I'm rambling. And then there's just like a single tear. And I'm like, those down my eye. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm messing this up. And then they just was like, yeah, I think we're going to stop now because of time. And then I realized, like, yeah, that was not it. Like, I completely messed up. But in hindsight, now when I think about it, I think I was just really, really nervous. And I had prepared in the way of like, oh, yeah, this is what the questions might be. But I never actually prepared myself for how I'd feel. And that completely threw me. So I guess that's probably what added to it. But it was just like an awful. I wasn't the only one. Other people that day had terrible experiences as well. So I think it was just in general, the whole vibe of it wasn't great.
Yeah, God. I mean, yeah, it's not the best first interview, but I think you're right there. Like you can't really always expect how you're going to feel
Mm,
situation. I think anything like assessments or things like that, particularly things that you don't get to do very often. Like
exactly. Yeah.
at best, you'll be interviewed once a year. Hopefully, you don't have to do it more than a few times.
Yeah.
It's not like something you're doing day in, day out, so you never
Mm,
quite know, and you don't know who's going to be in front of you. Um,
exactly.
and did you change your approach for the second time
Yeah, I
when it came to
did.
interviews?
Yeah, well, I think two things happened. One, it was a different university.
Hmm.
And so the university that I'm now training at, I think their approach is very different from the university I was interviewing for the first time round. And then second of all, I really kind of tapped into more of the reflection. I know it's such a buzzword, but the reflection part of the interviews and thinking about my own experiences and how that related to what I wanted to do and such and such. And I really asked a lot of people to help me with that because I I felt like I was really strong. I don't use that term, but I felt like I could hold my own when it came to like the clinical questions, and
Yeah.
because I had worked so much in clinical settings. But I felt like I wasn't maybe as reflective as I needed to be, which kind of made it come across as if I just memorized a textbook.
Mm.
Um, so I really asked a lot of people. I was like shameless. I'll be on Twitter. I'll be like, "Can anyone help me?" Like when people would post and say, "Oh, I've got capacity to support one person with their application, whatever." I'll be the first person like, "Help, please, please." I would like message people I've met once or never even met before, and I'm just like, "Can you help me?" But it really paid off because I
Mm.
didn't have any connections like that in the space, so I just had to forge my own, and then loads of people helped me. And in fact, someone at my uni now who was in the year above actually ended up helping me with an interview, like prep, and he was so helpful. And I really do think if I didn't have that kind of like interview prep session with him and another girl actually as well, I don't know if I would have been as reflective in the interview, which obviously helped. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you definitely learned from the first, the
Yeah,
very difficult
gosh,
experience of that first one, of course.
definitely.
That's yeah, interesting what you're saying about being shameless, or as the term you for it, because I feel like I did a similar kind of thing in my last what I had seen at the time as my last attempt to try and go train because
Mm,
I had many more failed attempts of getting on. Some were I think fairly decent attempts, others early on. I don't know why I applied to be honest,
yeah.
but it's what you did. I didn't really know it as I know now, so yeah, that
Mm,
kind of changed it. But yeah, I remember because I wanted to get like on some research, like get a publication. You don't need one for training, but like it's nice, and
yeah.
I am interested in research anyway. And then I was like, literally, I was working in a clinic where they were all at least 8A psychologists. So like they're all sort of been doing it at least a little while. I was like, anyone want me to like basically do all of the research bit
Yeah.
and everything else? And it worked. I did get on stuff. So, but it was
Yeah.
weird because it was a shift from before where I think how I viewed that. Some people, I think before sometimes people can do it in a bit more of a pushy kind of way, like in
Mm,
work, and it can sort of rub people the wrong way a little bit sometimes. Hopefully that
mm,
wasn't me, but I don't know.
yeah.
But it was sort of that thing like I really want to kind of get this thing right in terms of getting on, stuff like that.
I think it does help to have that mindset because if we're being realistic, it is very competitive and any edge that you can have helps. So if it is I know, like you said, it isn't recommend, it's not like an essential thing to have a publication, but I can understand like wanting to have that little thing extra to just boost your application. Obviously, it does help, but to be fair, I know people that have gotten without publications and stuff,
Yeah.
but it's not like an essential. But I do see how, yeah, you do have to get a bit ruthless sometimes and be like, can I help this, do this, can I do that? It
Yeah.
works, it does work.
And actually, come to think of it, given where we're training, it's a entrance exam, and
Mm.
obviously into I don't think that came up. Can't remember it coming up at all, but I don't. I've forgotten lots from that day for some reason. I don't
Okay,
really
yeah.
know why, but it might have come up. But yeah. And did you like mock interviews with these people that had helped be kind enough to help you online? Is that what you did?
Yeah, so we started during COVID, isn't it? So
Mm,
most of the things that I would have gone to, because I distinctly remember. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. But yeah, there was a event that was happening in March, I think it was, of 2020. And it was about applications for, it was like a widening access group run by the BC, BACP, BCP, B, what is it? British Psychological Society,
yeah.
BPS. Oh my gosh, so many things in my head right now. Run by the BPS, they have like a subdivision group called like Wedding Access or something, and they were running a session on how to like tailor your applications, blah blah blah, or something, interview prep. And I remember it was literally just as like COVID was kind of coming up, and I was like, oh, do I go? Do I not go? I was scared of using the tube, so I didn't go. And that was like the last event of the year, so I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? So that's why I think that was another even more of an encouragement to be like, look, I need someone to help me because I have no idea what I'm doing and I don't want to repeat of the last one. So I think I had two mock interviews with people who were actually trainees. And then my mum, thankfully, was like, sat down with me and listened to me like repeat over and over again what I felt would be like, so for the interview that we did, there was like a personal kind of question.
Mm.
So I would get her to help me like go over that over and over again, and then I'll record it and listen back. So even though she wasn't, obviously she's not in psychology, but it did help having someone just didn't understand any of the kind of terminology I was using, just to kind of make sure it wasn't just jargon as well. So yeah, I did kind of, yeah, I practiced a lot. I did. I'll admit that I definitely did.
Yeah, same. I did probably way too many unrecorded them as
Yeah.
well. But I mean, again, it was like trying to practice and speaking to someone who had trained at the place I wanted to get onto as well. That was really useful as well about just in terms of understanding the philosophy a little bit more about the people that might, where they might be coming from in terms of like almost like theoretical perspective or outlook on the profession because they
Mm,
really vary across courses. So
yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's definitely true. And I think also sometimes different courses value certain things more. So, for example, I know some courses really value research, for example, or value people a bit more like towards a medical model, or like their ethos is more that way inclined
Mm.
anyway. So I think it definitely speaking to someone who goes to the university that you're applying to or the course, whatever, I think it does help because otherwise you might not to say that you should tailor your answers in a specific way, you should always be yourself, but I think it does help if you understand like what their, yeah, like you said, philosophy is, does kind of help a little bit more. And also I was going to actually ask you, sorry, can I ask you?
Yeah.
um I was going to actually, yeah, so when you were applying, because I know we've had conversation, you've applied quite a few times, was
Yes.
there any point where you was like, oh, actually maybe it's the universities, and so you switched up the universities that you applied to, or was there any kind of different variations that you did like along the way?
Um, maybe small ones. So there was a few things in like how I decided which courses to apply to. It was based around like where they were geography,
Mm,
because like where you want to live and things like that. I think that's not to be underestimated. People that have moved
mm,
like to really different places, then they've got to do the doctorate, which is really hard, and then now create a new life in a new city per se. So I wanted to stay in a certain area. And then actually I'd always I don't know if I've done it before, but I'd always do the ones with the entrance exams. Like they were always quite appealing to me because um whilst my academic record is fine, like it wasn't like distinction first,
mm,
like PhD. Because some places you're going up against people that also have research PhDs
yeah.
and or A stars, and like so I think that it felt like that leveled the playing field a little bit, knowing that if you could I did a master's in research, but it was a while ago. But like I felt a little bit like it gives me a bit of a chance in terms of the entrance exam we did. So that's sort of how I came about from it. And then I was only actually had one interview, and I got on. So I only ever had one, which is like
Oh,
that's a good conversion rate. But obviously it took me a while
yeah.
to get there. Yeah, so I think that's how it did, and I think I changed a few over the year, like different applications, but
Mm,
it's it was probably just based on internal sense of why it didn't work, like because you don't get any
mm.
feedback. It's
Yeah,
really
that's
hard. But
annoying.
then yeah, and even people that sort of in some people who I knew a bit more in the know, like there's no one answer, and it's hard because unless you like you did sit in front of somebody and get feedback around stuff, like it's you
Mm.
really don't know. But they were the things that kind of shaped the application process for me anyway.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting as well that they don't give you, and I understand why, but they don't give you feedback if you don't get an interview. And of course, it is very time consuming, but then it really makes it hard to know what actually do you need to improve on or what you need to change. So
Yeah.
yeah, I do understand that's quite hard. And I also did the same. Sorry, what was you going to say?
No, go for it. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, yeah, I did the same with the selection test because I felt like although I had done a lot of clinical work, it was mainly an IAPT, and I didn't feel like I was very diverse in terms of my skills. So I didn't know, maybe I had a false image of what it would mean, but I didn't know if I would be given as much merit if I just applied on application alone. So I kind of did that whole like, yeah, let me do all the tests. And I think there was one, yeah, I don't think Surrey did this anymore, but Surrey, Salomons, and UEL all had testing, and you kind of did it
Mm.
for all. Yeah, so I kind of just like, okay, there's three out the way. um, I can apply for all three, and then my exam goes to all of them. So yeah, it is. You got to be a bit strategic about it as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think yeah, it depends what your sort of like organize it accordingly in terms of what you value, really, in
Yeah.
a sense. Absolutely. Um, and so you finally get on to training. You finally got a golden ticket and on to training. And I know there's a period for me where it was like hit me after the exam. I was like, I'm gonna have to like do this thing. I'd not really considered the work in front of me. Like, how was it?
Mm.
How was it for you?
Um, so again, like I said, because we started during COVID, I think there was an element of it being a bit disappointing, if I'm being honest, just because of the
Mm.
fact that everything was online for a lot of people anyway. It wasn't just us, but I think my anticipation that had built up over the summer and everything, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, great. And then it was a bit different, obviously, because you're not interacting. And I think we only went in once that first time. Yeah, like I don't remember going in more than once. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was just like, oh, okay. And even then everyone was like socially distanced with masks on or something, I think. I can't even remember. I don't even know. I can't remember. It was all blur. But yeah, I just remember being like, oh, okay, maybe this is different. But one thing that really helped me was that I had very low, this sounds bad, but I had very low expectations in the sense of like what about what I'm actually going to learn because I didn't know. If I'm being honest, you know, when everyone's like, oh, what does a psychologist do? Please, I didn't know. I was just
Yeah.
like, I don't know, you do some stuff, you do a bit of this, you do a bit of that. So in terms of teaching, I really kind of had a low bar because I didn't know what I'd be learning. And so I guess in that way I was kind of happy because I didn't know, I couldn't compare it to anything else.
Mm.
But in terms of like actually starting and doing placements and things, again, my placement got changed last minute because of COVID. So my first year placement was somewhere different, and it ended up being a split placement, which was okay because I got experience in two different places. But yeah, that as well, because I couldn't see people face to face. So a lot of it was online. And then I had to be really creative and go on walks with people and have like walk and talk therapy. So
Mm.
it was good. Like it really did push me to think a bit more outside of the box and kind of draw on the resources that I already knew. Um, so all the stuff that I had learned that I thought, oh, like it's funny, like I think I mentioned before I used to work in like for a laundry company. And there
Mm.
were so many things that I was like, this is absolute rubbish. Like, why is this woman like my manager? So I was like, why is she making me do all this stuff? But honestly, some of those skills I wish was using. So like even just being paying attention to detail or like just some of the stuff about like communication
Mm.
that are like more soft skills. I don't really know if you can teach someone that, they kind of have to experience it. I definitely realized that how some of the jobs that I had that were not psychological at all definitely helped me. And so I guess that kind of helped as well when I was in first year. I was like, oh, okay, this does feel familiar. It's just a different way of applying what I already know. And at the end of the day, it's always about that connection. Like we're all human, so you're responding to someone who's going through something. It's not necessarily like this amazingly magical thing. Like, of course, it does have an impact, but at the root of it, at the core of it, it is just communication and connecting. So I actually, yeah, it was all right. First year was okay for me. I don't know maybe your experience was different.
Yeah, so you just reminded me of the thing around human connection, and we can have lots of different models and way
Mm.
techniques and ways of working. Actually, in my first year, one of my supervisors sent me I think it's Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers, yeah, about person-centered therapy, and there's this really nice passage in where it's like how being listened to and people not twisting your words and like really kind of being connected and listening to and not trying to reframe it or dismiss or solve it or anything like can just be so
Mm.
helpful. And I think it was really good because obviously within a first year placement where I was in a working in different models and kind of things that I was only just starting to get familiar with. It was so nice to know that it's almost like just connecting with a person is such a valuable thing.
Mm.
So I think particularly like first years, if they're starting and they're panicking about this technique and that technique, like it's all, yeah, this all has its place and it's all useful, but you need to start with that connection thing first,
Absolutely.
before you worry about it. Because if you just launch into techniques or whatever, I think you're going to disaster. But
Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
so I also had a split placement as well, working in seemingly lots of different models at the time, but yeah, that was I really enjoyed it actually. It was great. It's a community mental health team and different, more relational,
Mm.
psychodynamic ways of working, and that was different from what I had done before. So yeah, but I learned. I felt like I learned a lot. I did enjoy the placement. Obviously, same as you, sort of in between lockdowns and non-lockdowns, and maybe a lockdown and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah,
which kind of
the
you know.
uncertainty.
And actually, the team and everyone I was working with, we were all in the same kind of situation, so that was
Mm.
made it a bit easier. I think the thing that I had to readjust to was becoming a student again in terms of academic work. I'd not done that for a long time, and then it was sort of like doing it again, and obviously at a higher
Mm.
level probably than before. So I got through everything fine, but it felt like that was like the more kind of difficult element. I'd done lots of different like community mental health team work, different kind of jobs in and around psychology. So I felt okay working with people. Obviously, it wasn't really in a therapy, well, it was in some spaces, but less in the therapy role. But it was more to do with the thing that was like a new thing was the academic,
Mm.
how to write an essay per se, like things like
Yeah,
that
no,
that you've
yeah,
not done for
it does
ages.
matter. Yeah.
So I that was probably more difficult than I had anticipated in a way. But I
Mm.
enjoyed the first year. Yeah, I enjoyed the first
Yeah.
year, and we both got through it.
Yeah.
Most
Thank
people
God.
do. Yeah, most people do,
Yeah.
which is nice. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, how
I
was
was
your
just
second? Oh, go on.
No, I was just thinking about, yeah, because although I did enjoy first year, I think my struggle with it wasn't necessarily to do with the course or anything like that. I think it was more internal. And it's kind of, I was just thinking, I think it was more of like the adjustment to being this thing, this idea of like a trainee, but then also feeling like, maybe I guess you can summarize it as imposter syndrome, but then still feeling like, oh, do I even know what I'm doing? Which is probably why I was mentioning going back to the core things of just feeling it out in the room with some, well, on a digital space with someone, and like trying to relate in a like human way, because I think that was the thing that I struggled with probably the most in first year, of having this title but yet not necessarily feeling like I not deserved it, but like I could actually fulfill that role. And I remember my supervisor at the time, he pulled me up on it. He was like, you never speak up for yourself in the meetings. Like, he basically was like, there's conversations happening, and there was one particularly about one of my clients, and he said, you're not speaking up. Like, why are you not speaking up? And I was like, oh, because it's all the psychiatrists and the psychologist like qualifies and stuff. He's like, you're
Mm.
band 6, like you need to step up. I was like, oh gosh. I was like, yeah, I know that, but I don't feel like, I just don't feel as if I can. He was like, no, but you're here. So, but regardless of what you feel, that's not the reality. And it kind of was a bit of like a slap in the face sort of thing, but it really did kind of make me realize, okay, there's going to be a point where someone's going to be turning to me and saying, what do you think we should do? And I'm going to have to figure it out. And I can't just be like, oh, I'm a trainee or like whatever. Like, you can't hide behind that. So I guess that was definitely the biggest thing for me, like just trying to reconcile that whole feeling of not necessarily knowing what I'm doing, or what is this model, what is psychodynamic, like what does that even mean? But then also trying to just still hold on to who I feel like I am as a core, and not trying to mold myself into this image of what I thought a trainee should be. So
Mm.
that's probably what I found the most difficult, yeah, for first year. But second year it was good.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I dropped that real quick. Just thought, you know what, I need to step into it, like just own it a bit more. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, because there is in first year as well, like beyond a certain block of teaching, a month or two of teaching, really not that much has changed from who you were really
Mm.
before you got on the
Yeah.
course. Because I mean, it's not you don't there's no magical transformation like overnight. Like you're learning as you go through, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's easy
Yeah.
to almost forget that. I think looking back on it, that you now all of a sudden because you've been granted access to this course, that you now should have all this extra stuff somehow.
No, you
Yeah.
don't. That's the whole point, where you're there to learn. But yeah, it can feel like you should know. And actually, because we start in October and then we start placements, what, like January, February? Like really early, I feel. So yeah, we don't really have that. And you think about it, you've got Christmas break. So there's not that much time of actual learning and stuff before you're just put into the deep end, I guess. But it was good. It was really good.
Mm.
I think it was a good challenging experience.
Yeah. I'm glad it was a year long placement as well. Some courses
Definitely,
don't
yeah.
do that. Some do 6 months, 6 months, all the way
Yeah, I
through.
don't I feel like you need that year, especially as first years, to just ground yourself and just feel a little bit more secure and have like consistent supervision with someone. And yeah, I feel like it's a lot more helpful.
Definitely. Definitely. And then so you made it onto and past the second year. Like,
Second
was there
year,
anything different about the second year? What changed? Like, what was
yeah.
yeah, what was good? What did you
Um,
enjoy? You didn't enjoy so much?
Second year, wow, it feels weird because we've literally just come out of second year, but not really.
Yes.
Second year, I would say, like, if I was to sum up second year in a word, it would just be actually 3 letters. It would be MRP, and like just consumed my whole second year experience. So the MRP, for
Mm,
people who don't know, is like your final research project that you do, to your thesis, I guess. And I guess that was second year was when it started to get a bit more real, because you've basically you should finalize you should be starting to finalize your ideas, and you should be asking like your supervisors and stuff for like feedback on your ideas and putting through ethical submissions, all that stuff. But I just realized that at the time I was just kind of like, I just kind of took a very relaxed, chilled approach at first. And then I think it was because I was very fortunate that my research, there was a lot of respondents to the respondees, I don't know, to the interviews that like the adverts that I put up about the interviews. So I was able to get like all my participants really quickly. So I got like really lax and was like, oh, this is fine, like whatever.
mm,
So I kind of, yeah, didn't really focus as much on that. But apart from MRP, which did take up a lot of stuff, I think a lot of it was also really nice to see how I started to form my own kind of style, I guess. So again, for those who don't know, second year you tend to, well, on my course, you tend to do a child placement and a 6 month child placement and a 6 months learning disability placement. And I had my child placement first, and that one was like amazing. Oh, I loved it. I thought it was just great. I always knew I wanted to work with children. Like I said, from 7, I just knew. And I
yeah.
had worked in a school before I had worked with children, but that placement really kind of locked that in for me. I was like, yeah, I love working with kids. Like they're great. They're really honest, which can be a great thing, and it can also be bad if you're not well equipped to handle that criticism. But it was great, and so I think that's when I started to develop my style a little bit more. I realized I am a very, like I said, relational person. I'm very part of
Mm,
the pun. I'm not clinical, like in that sense at all. I'm very like I talk a lot, and I'm very expressive and I'm bubbly. And I realized that definitely started to lend itself well in a children's setting or like in a camp setting, because
mm,
especially when you're working with teenagers, I think they can sense straight off the bat if you're being disingenuous.
oh,
So for me, it was very important to just be myself, and this is how I am.
yeah.
So yeah, I definitely started to shape my style a little bit more of like how I like to engage with people. And yeah, LD as well was another really interesting service, like working with people with learning disabilities. Um, yeah, it forces you to slow down and think about how you can help someone who may not be thinking 100 miles per hour like you do. And that's not necessarily like going to be helpful if you're just being like, oh yeah, just do this, let's do that. You really have to be very considerate. And that was really good. So I enjoyed, yeah, second year, definitely enjoyed the placements, thought it was great. Most of it was all about MRP, just thinking about all of that stuff. But I did enjoy, like, so my topic is about Black women who gave birth
Yeah.
for the first time in 2020. And that's a topic that I love talking about, mums and maternal mental health. So that's why I was like, oh, okay, this is great. And my interviews went really well. So although it was
Right.
very all consuming, yeah, it was
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
enjoyable.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, recruitment for MRPs is an interesting
Oh
topic
my
we
gosh.
could talk
Yeah,
about
you
for a
know all
while.
about.
Yeah, I know about that.
Yeah.
It's ups and downs. I think it's really not. I won't necessarily talk about the recruitment thing because obviously, yeah, well, obviously we've spoken about that before. But just in terms of like when you're trying to build up these ideas with your supervisor around how many people you need and how easy
Mm,
that would be, it can, well, my expectations didn't match the reality in a way. Like there was a mismatch between
yeah.
what's reasonable, what's doable, and also how much effort that kind of took to recruit people. Not there's anyone's, but it's not like a blame or a fault or anything, but like it's just so hard to sometimes really grasp exactly how it did. And I think that's particularly when it's like general population. If it's like a
Yes,
clinical
yeah.
sample, um, you do have the task of NHS ethics per se, but then you might have a group of people who are accessing like services quite regularly. So
Mm.
they might be people who are willing to do that rather than sort of just like shouting generally in public and seeing
Yeah,
what comes
no,
back.
it's so true.
But yeah, that's yeah, maybe, but it's I think on some things you can't really you can't plan for. I've definitely learned that some things you just can't just happen, and you're like, how did that happen?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
definitely. What would you say is your takeaway from second year?
yeah. I enjoyed it as well. I enjoyed the placements again. LD, learning disability, CMHT, and mine was CAMS, but also the looked after children
Mm,
section of CAMS as well, that was really interesting as well because I
yeah.
think it really gets you thinking about lots of things, particularly about like diagnostic type stuff, like the utility of that and when it's helpful, when it's not, and a lot of the narratives and everything else that goes around in those kind of systems and how it impacts on the people that sat in front of you in a way that was really interesting. And my supervisors were very good at that kind of thing. And I think people who end up accessing looked after children's services, they've often had lots of things happen to them during their
Mm,
lives, and taking a very sort of singular model and applying it is probably not the most helpful thing, at least from my experience. So that was really good. And actually that lent itself well to like the systemic work that I did in
yes,
learning disabilities.
yeah,
That was a new
yeah.
experience, but it was really useful. And both teams cross placements were all really good. So I really enjoyed it. And just think about your identity. It's really interesting in terms of like what theories people are drawn to and ideas. And it's like a lot of that, and actually my first year in a way, but in different setting, it's like a lot around attachment and
Mm,
object relations about how people relate to each other. And now just sort of then having started the third year, it's like I just keep talking about attachments and
yeah.
all this kind of stuff.
I
And
mean, it's the
I mean, it's
basis
not a
of
bad
so many
model.
things.
I like it, but it's just like at the start of training, I probably would have never predicted that. But it's just like all of a
Mm,
sudden, I find it as a useful framework again, just for human relating.
yeah.
It's nothing. There's nothing pathological about it or sort of diagnostics. Like it's just how
Mm,
trying to understand the process of how people relate. And yeah, so that was. I think that would have been a surprise to me if I would have said that at the start of training.
yeah,
So yeah,
that's
that's it. And
good.
yeah, I think just kind of the second year, the second placement in the second year, I think like finding even a bit more of that voice and your supervisors. I feel like my supervisors have been quite good at pitching, almost letting you do things like where you're at in training. So they're not sort of just throwing you in to this really big complicated thing if you're not ready, but then they're also letting you do things that you're sort of on the cusp of being able to. I've been quite fortunate in that way. So
Mm,
yeah, I've enjoyed all the training. I mean, obviously the academic work and the MRP and stuff. It's a lot of I think sacrifice is probably the best word in
oh
terms
my
of
gosh,
the
that's the
course.
best word.
It feels like a
Literally is.
sacrifice, yeah, and it's worth it and it's all
Really.
worthwhile. But like that, you can't hide the fact that there's lots of hours in front of a computer screen or in front of
Yeah.
meetings or different people. Like it's not.
Mm,
I think the experience is not easily gained in that way. Like you're provided with the framework, but you have to work through it and with it, and yeah,
yeah. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that word. Like, I think that's literally what it is. And before we started talking, I was thinking about what is it? Because people say, oh, it's hard. Okay, yes, it is hard. Training is hard, but like what I'll try and think of what exactly is it that's hard. And I think it's the sacrifices and having to always weigh up like, okay, if I do this, then it means I won't be able to do that. But then I want to do that. So does it mean I need to like compromise in some area? So
yeah.
it really is about trying to balance everything and compromising sometimes and having to sacrifice some things sometimes.
Mm.
But I would say that's probably what I was, if someone's asked me, that's what I would say is what's hard about training. I don't particularly think academically it's that hard in terms of the work because it is more like case reports and stuff like that. It's not, you're not,
Yeah.
yeah, unless it's the MRP, you're not really writing much kind of literature kind of stuff, um, literature based stuff. But yeah, I would say in terms of like the difficulties, yeah, it all kind of comes down to that balance and trying to hold everything while also not clinging on to it too tightly. But it is really, it is tricky.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and I think it's long as well, 3 years. Like there's all these guys. You get better at things, obviously, and then you
Mm.
get more astute at managing things and everything else. But yeah, it's a long time to be doing something, and it's not an easy
Mm.
level on any stretch of the. So yeah, yeah,
Mm.
agree.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, and are you looking forward to the rest of the rest of the year?
Yeah, no, I
You're on the
am.
final, I suppose I see you
Final
almost like
stretch.
you turned the corner a little bit and sort
Mhm.
of it's the final stretch, albeit there's lots of work to do. How are you
True.
feeling about looking forward?
I feel great. I keep thinking to myself, okay, April, May, that's all you kind of have to think about to phone that, because that's when we have our, is it Viva? Viva. Viva Viva. What's
Viva, yeah,
Viva? I
Viva,
was like,
yeah.
is it Viva? That's when we have our
Viva la
Vivas.
Viva. Let's just go with
Yeah, was it? Isn't it like, wasn't that mean like life or something? Anyway, that's when we have our
Yes, we
Vivas.
do.
And so I keep thinking, oh, okay, I can hold on until like hold it all together until then. Once that's done, then I feel like I can relax a little bit more. Unfortunately, I've well, fortunately, unfortunately, like my placement I'm on now is my perinatal specialist placement, and I love it. But one thing I do wish is that maybe I had a bit more headspace to kind of do it now, do it like in an earlier year, so like second year or something, because now obviously I'm thinking a lot about MRP, and my MRP is on perinatal stuff as well. So,
Yeah,
well, just women and babies. So it does feel a bit like, oh, I really wish I had more time to think through this stuff and do all the reading that I want to do, um, while also not having to think like, oh, but I could really be doing some stuff like transcribing with MRP stuff. So that's the only thing I would say I'm a bit like annoyed about or like a bit upset about. But I would say, yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to my next placement as well, which is older adults. We've had a lot of teaching about older adults and it feels quite heavy. And I think it's almost symbolic that it's going to be the last placement that I do. And it's also about lots of end of life stuff and thinking about like accomplishments, achievements. And it's very kind of almost mirrors what I feel like I'll be doing course wise. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I'm excited. I think probably the only thing I'm nervous about is just making sure everything gets done on time. Again, that whole timeline in my head.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Hmm. Yeah, and be there. Well, the end will be in sight before you know it. If the last 2 years there's anything to go by, at least my
Literally.
experience. Yeah, God, it has flown by. It's flown
Yeah.
by. I'm sure everything will be fine in terms of timeline and stuff. And I think that's a nice. I don't know about you, but the having been through like I don't know how many assessments, but whatever the assessments and placements we've done, it kind of gives you a bit of an assurance in a way that even if it doesn't go straight forward, you'll get through. You'll
Yeah.
get through it and it'll be fine, and people were there to support you. So. Yeah, God, it'll go
Yeah,
quick, that's for
definitely.
sure. That's for sure.
Yeah. And then it's like thinking about what do we do next?
Jobs
Now
or
we're
not
done.
jobs or
What do
yeah.
we do? Oh gosh. Well, coming to a psychological service near you soon, won't we? We'll be
Yeah.
there.
We'll be there. Yeah, we'll be
You'll
there.
see us.
Definitely. Definitely.
But
Uh,
yeah. It's weird because we keep getting like like emails and stuff about jobs. Like we've had
oh
quite a
yeah, it's
few.
very real. Like it's
It's
not
like,
far off.
leave me alone. Like, I'm only just figuring it out now. I just want to do
Yeah.
my stuff and go and get like time to just decompress. But
Yeah.
yeah, though I don't know what I'm gonna do job wise yet, but got
Yeah.
time.
Me neither. Me neither. Fair enough. And the other thing you've done apart from your training is your podcast, which you say
Yeah.
before we started recording, you said you've not done much of that lately, but tell me and everyone about a bit about your podcast.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a podcast. It's on a extended hiatus. And it's called Let's Check In. So I guess it's just about like let's check in about the doctorate, let's check in about life, let's just check in. And I think it came up because the name was every time I see a client, I'll be like, oh, let's just book a check-in call. Like it's not a full-blown therapy session, right? Let's just like check in with each other.
Yeah.
Um, so that's what it's about. It's about psychology, it's about the doctorate, it's about life, little bits of things here and there. But to be honest, I think I have 12, 13 episodes and I haven't updated it since 2021, 2020. I don't know. It's been a while.
Yeah. Sure.
Which kind of lends back to what we were talking about with the sacrifice. Like you have to
Yes.
pick, like, listen, I'm either going to record the episode and edit, or I'm going to go and see my friends. Like, I need to pick one. And so, yeah, you can't. I remember back in A levels, there was like this triangle thing and it was like study, sleep, socialize or something. And you can
Okay.
only have two at one time. So if you're not going to sleep and you're socializing, you'll study, or you're not going to socialize but you'll study and sleep. So you got to pick it, like which one are you going to give up? And that's
Yeah.
kind of why I think the podcast got pushed to
That's
the side a bit. But I am going to revive it. And I think probably I'll talk a little bit more about my experience, but also a little bit more about just life and thinking about it from a psychological lens.
mm.
Because just general things that go on, like the world's on fire right now. The doomsday clock is near 12.
Yes, we spoke about that way back in our team
Literally.
project. Yeah, the doomsday clock.
The doomsday clock
It's
is
gonna
right,
hit midnight.
really going to hit midnight. So I feel like there's so many things we can think about, but also understanding it from like psychological theory as well. There's so many things that feed into it. Even when you're talking about attachment, there's
Yeah.
so many things that go on in the world. I'm like, yeah, I can see where attachment theory could come into
Yeah.
play here. But
Oh,
so I think I'll probably talk a bit more about that. I'll have guests on. I've had guests on, but I'll have more. I
oh.
just but for now it's there. If you feel free, you can go back, listen. I think it's more helpful, especially for people who are in the application season.
Yeah.
What is it now? It's November, so people have sent out applications
Yeah,
for
people would have
September.
just applied. So I don't know if there's anything because obviously there will
Yeah.
people be doing for selection tests or interviews at
Yes.
some point.
Yeah.
So it might be
Yeah.
helpful.
There's a podcast episode on selection tests actually, and one of the girls from our uni also is on it with me. So
Oh,
it's quite helpful, I think, for those things. And then I think I've done one about interviews. I can't remember, but yeah, you can listen if you want to. It's Let's
yes, I'm sure it'd be
Talk.
good. I think I probably didn't search out those kind of resources enough prior to in like previous, not the last time I applied, but beforehand, like because when I
Mm,
applied and got on, I was surrounded by lots of people who like knew the process basically. But before that, I was sort of I didn't really know where to look or to find, or maybe I didn't want to. I have no idea, but I
I
didn't
don't know if there
do
was
it.
that many resources. Well, I think
Yeah,
in the last couple of years, I've seen a lot of people on like Twitter and Instagram and like
yeah,
even TikTok, like doing stuff psychologically related. So I guess maybe it just wasn't available. But I just thought I'd put it out there. People can listen to it. And the thing is, there's going to be application seasons every year. So every year, I don't think things change dramatically, but you can go back and listen. And if it's helpful, it's
yeah.
helpful.
No, I should imagine unless they absolutely overhaul everything to do with the application
Yeah.
process, people will still get caught up with the same problems, questions. Like it's just
Mm,
just normal, isn't it? Yeah,
yeah, pretty much. But
yeah.
yeah.
Great. Well, I will put a link below. I will put all the episodes, and everybody needs to listen to them.
So
Listen
Spotify or anywhere that you listen to podcasts
any
and
podcast. Yeah,
Instagram. Yeah.
yeah, cool. And did you have any? So you're going to get back to your podcast at some point.
Mhm.
Any sort of further ideas for in the future? Where's it going to go? Or
Yeah. I think I want to, like I said, I want to talk more about like psychology and but relate
yeah,
it to current events and stuff. But also, uh, one thing that I think sometimes, like I said at the beginning, gets neglected is you prep a lot about what to do for interviews and all this stuff. But I notice, especially going through training the last couple of years, there is a really big shift that happens internally. Well, for me anyway, about just thinking about who you are, identity, and stuff like that. And some of the things that I wish I had known, like journaling and just being more reflective, I wish I had started doing that before I even got into training.
yeah,
Because I felt like for me in particular, there was loads of other like additional layers that kind of started to crop up. So if you think about like the social graces and stuff, like there were so many of those things that applied to me. I was like,
mm,
I didn't consider this as much as I probably should have. So I think I'd also be talking about those things as well on the podcast, and like how, for me specifically as a Black woman, being
mm,
in a clinical space that is mainly white, female, how does that feel? And also how to navigate some of those things, because it is weird sometimes, like being
mm,
the only person of color in the room and then like being also expected to be the one giving all of the information and being in a position of power when normally that's not the case. So it's a lot of things. There's a lot of things to unpack there, but
yeah.
yeah, I guess I'll be talking about those things as well.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Listen, I'll keep an
Yeah.
eye out for when it's
Don't hold your breath
launched.
because I'm not promising
Yeah,
anything
there's
soon.
no pressure, no pressure. Okay. And any final reflections on training or anything that we've discussed?
On training or anything. I would say just advice to anyone who is applying or who's just interested in it. Like it is a worthwhile experience. I honestly do think I've changed as a person, just being on training. My psychological skills have obviously gotten better. Well, they should have. I definitely think
Hope
they
so,
have.
yeah.
Yeah, they've got better, but I do think it's a very worthwhile thing. But one thing I've always say, and I will maintain this, like clinical psychology is not the only way to practice psychologically. There's so many other routes, and even now I think they're introducing new roles that are within the psychological sphere, but it's not necessarily as a clinical psychologist. But I would encourage everyone, like, if you want to apply, definitely go. Well, application season's done now, but go for it, but don't make it feel like, oh my gosh, if I don't do this, then it's the end, because it's really not. There's so many other things you can do. And like I said, life really does have a way of teaching you things, even in places that you would least expect. Like I learned so much stuff when I was working in an estate office, and like when I was working in a laundry company, like doing marketing, some random things, and then it's been applicable. So yeah, just don't, because I know people get really fixated on it, but just try
Yeah.
not to. And yeah, and also Brett, well done for doing this, because I wish I saw things like this around. Like I said, I think more people are starting to do it now, which is great.
Yeah.
um so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, hopefully it's useful to people. There's obviously what we spoke about today, and there's a few other ones that I did get a few different perspectives. So hopefully it helps, a little bit. But no, that's great. Thank you so much for all your
No
time,
worries.
Levine, and
Thank you for
maybe
having
we'll
me.
catch up again
Yeah,
later in the future as well.
cool. Thanks,
All
Brett.
right.
Bye.